Greetings everyone, welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes right here on the YouTube. I post these every single Friday, so please make sure and subscribe so you get a little ding every time a new class goes live. This week, we are doing a little class that is aligned to the tides, a little relevancy to the seasons, and we are talking about decomposition magic or composting magic. This is an aspect of my own work that I rarely talk about publicly, but folks have been sort of asking about it as they've read about it in my books and heard about it a bit in workshops and stuff. So here we are. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to show you what it's all about and what you can do in your own practice to put this to work. So we are talking about taphosis, right? Which is kind of what I call this sorcerous practice of working with decomposition, rot, and decay, from the Greek taphos, meaning tomb, and taphology, right? Which is the sort of adopted term for the study of decomposition scientifically, which I think is very cool. So in this class, we'll be talking about what decomposition is, just a little surface scratch on that because it's a big topic, why this is a magical process, how you can go about doing decay and rot magic, and why you would want to, right? And then I'm going to give you some really practical examples, some ritual ideas that you can do yourself. So let's get into it, shall we? First, what is decomposition? It is the natural process of felled beings and organic things returning to source, returning to land. It's what happens when we die. So when we think about any physical being, a human, an animal, an insect, meeting the end of their life, this is the natural process that happens that returns them to the soil, returns them to the land, and in a more sorcerous spiritual context, returns us to the Mother Earth, to the goddess land, to the very substrate physical of life, right? And we're going to unpack this a little bit later on because there are so many layers of mysteries here that when you explore all of it the way we're going to in this class, you'll understand why this is such a crucial aspect of herb magic, of plant magic, right? That if we're not working with the soil, we're only getting half the story. We're only getting the life side of the coin and not the death side of the coin. And both of them are very, very important, right? The lack of discussion and connection with the process of death in the contemporary world is problematic. It causes a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, causes us to do a lot of weird, stupid things. So this is an invitation to deal with that. So we'll get into that in a minute. So organic substances are broken down into simpler parts. In fact, they're often broken down into the simple parts that made them up in the first place. So if you think about an apple falling from a tree, not being harvested, and that apple going through the stages of rot and decay, it's breaking back down, it's melting back into the soil, back into gases and minerals and proteins and fats and sugars that are the same building blocks that the tree pulled from the soil, enabling it to grow that apple in the first place, right? So there's a very interesting cycle of death and birth here that is really the mystery and really the power of this work. There are also some chemical processes to decomposition and rot that we're not going to talk about here, other than the chemical processes that are organic to most material living beings. So again, we're just scratching the surface because it's a huge scientific exploration that goes far beyond the scope of this class or what I really know or understand. So we'll be focusing on organic processes here like death, decomposition, rot, decay, and ultimately disappearance, right? Something disappearing back into the land. So a cool little sidebar before we get into the magical applications here, a cool sidebar regarding physical bodies like yours and mine, like a lot of animals, is that decomposition begins at the moment of death. Basically, the minute the heart stops beating, decomposition begins. The body has processes in place for this. one of the two ways that decomposition begins immediately is through autolysis, which is where we have chemicals and enzymes in our body that work to start breaking down our tissues, to start unwinding us, undoing us, right? So that is built in to the physical being. Death is always being carried in the wisdom of the living body. There's that. And then there's putrefaction, right? Which is a less cool word, but still very important. And putrefaction essentially happens when not us starts breaking us down. So I think the really accurate definition of putrefaction is probably bacterium, when bacteria are able to start breaking our tissues down because our faculties of protection are no longer in place because we're dead. But I also consider fungi, and I also consider scavengers, right? That in nature, when an animal passes, there will be bacteria and fungus, but also other animals who will come feed off of their body. So those three things, only the bacteria is truly, as far as I understand it scientifically, part of the putrefaction process. But I think about all three of them. Scavengers being like, pretty cool part of it, when you think about it. And then you have detritivores, right? Earthworms, who kind of take it to the next stage. So we have bacteria and fungi and scavengers when we're kind of whole like this to break us down. And then when we're really broken down into smaller parts, we have creatures that live in the soil, different insects and bugs and worms that will break us down even further, right? So the detritivores, a very cool group of beings who play into this whole decomp process. So a little bit of a sidebar, but I love to get nerdy about stuff like that. So there you go. Spiritually, decomposition, decay, and rot is a return to the land, right? And this is going to come up so much that we are being quite literally pulled back down into the earth from which we originally emerged. If you ever can watch a time lapse of, an apple or an animal decomposing, right? It's as if they are melting back into the earth or being pulled back down. And that's the energy that I want you to consider and carry with you throughout the more sorcerous parts of this discussion later on, that there is a pulling down, there's a returning to source, that we all came from the land, right? Your body, which was forged in the womb of your mother, was made from the materials that she took in from the earth, the food that she ate, the water that she drank, right? You are made from what comes out of the land, and the land will claim you once again when it is time for your heart to stop beating. So consider too how many death goddesses, generally goddesses, there are some death gods, but how many death goddesses carry nooses or goads or scythes or other apparatuses by which they could pull you down or cut you down, right? That there's this concept, this idea of us being felled like the wheat, like the corn, or like a tree, being cut down and pulled back down into the earth. I think about the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European death goddess Kolyos, whose name translates to the coverer, right? That she carries a noose in most of her sort of child culture iterations that she uses to pull us down back into the land. And then this concept of the coverer, that we're being covered by soil, right? That it's almost like we're pulling up a blanket of soil over ourselves to go into the other world, into that world. And we see that over and over and over again, this resonance between the felling of foodstuffs, right, at the time of death, at this time of year. And we see this in these death goddesses who pull us back down and bring us back to where we started. So just something to consider. We are all come from the earth. We all come from the earth. We're sustained by the earth while we're here, and then we return to her. All things belong to the land. All things are hers. This is why when we start exploring more deeply the various lore and practice of any truly animistic culture, whether it's druids and pagans or wherever, we continually see Earth Mother figures, motherhood being a key idea here, because we're being born from the land and sustained from it, like a child is born from and sustained by their mother. But then the flip side of a death goddess, who then brings us back to where we started, right? From womb to tomb, we say. So this is important. So why is decomposition, decay and rot, this thing that we are sort of hardwired as human animals to avoid, right? The smell of putrefaction is a symbol to us. When we smell that, you know, there's like an aversion. We're wired to stay away from that stuff. Why would this be a magical process, something that we would want to intentionally engage in? First, it's natural. This happens. It's sure. It's a fact. It's going to happen. We might as well allow for our practice of magic, natural ritual, natural sorceries to involve all the parts. It doesn't mean we need to perseverate or obsess about death, but as I mentioned earlier, I think there's some disharmony when the only way we engage with the practice is in the flowers and the leaves and the sunshine, right? That's just only half the story. So the invitation is there to go somewhere a bit darker, right? And that's okay. It allows a return to source of things at their expiration, when things are no longer needed, when they have served their purpose, when they have lived their life. And I'm not speaking about people here. I'm speaking about patterns and behaviors and ideas and engagements and contracts, right? It allows us, instead of to just kind of let them go and wash our hands of them, to actually put them back where they go, right? This is like doing your chores, right? Spiritually, that instead of just banishing or releasing or setting free, we're putting things back, right? We're completing the cycle. And in doing that, there's a level of completion and efficacy that we don't see with many other types of rituals of banishing and releasing, where we just sort of send things out into the ether because we choose to be done with them, and that's fine. But it's like doing your laundry and keeping all the clothes in the dryer instead of folding them and putting them away. Everything is still in a state of chaos. You're not really sure where things are. You have to go digging for things. Things could get mixed back up into dirty laundry. When if you just finish the cycle and put everything back where it needs to go, then there's this sense of completion and order and harmony and beauty, right? And this is what we want. So this is why we do this. This practice of engaging this way attends to the ways of sacred reciprocity. We acknowledge that everything we have comes from somewhere, and that we are willing, at the time that we're ready to release that thing, to return it back to that somewhere from whence it came, right? To engage in reciprocity. This also allows a vessel, a physical place to release into, to banish into. Again, instead of just sending things out, it gives us this very physical, tangible, practical place to put our stuff. It's our compost bin, spiritual compost bin, or literal, right? They overlap. We'll talk about that here in a minute. The process of decomposition and decay and rot, as I mentioned earlier, has a pull. It has a downward descending, breaking down, unwinding pull. So why not use that to our benefit, right? Why not, if we're trying to let something go, align to something with an energy of pulling to get it out of us, to get it away from us, right? The energy's already there. Do you want to stand in the wind blowing at you when you're getting rid of something, or go stand next to a whirlpool that's pulling things away from you, right? This is the contemplation and the alignment to natural magic. And the last point I'll mention here, because there are more that we'll talk about in a second, is that this gives us an opportunity to confront death, to confront this very natural process, this thing that's going to happen to all of us, and to maybe start softening some of our fears and some of our worries about it. You just start seeing it as even as beautiful, or if nothing else, mysterious, right? That to lean into the mystery of it from a place of curiosity rather than fear and dread. Because again, that fear and dread of the mystery of death causes us to do some very, very bizarre things to our bodies, to society, right? You can think of a list of things, right? So there you go. So how can we align ourselves to the magic of rot and decay? I'm going to give you some really practical ritual examples here in a minute, but let's kind of warm the topic up here. First, seasonally, right? Right now, it's September. I'm recording this here in kind of early September 2023, and we're about to start seeing the world around us participate in letting go, in dying off, in dying back, and we're going to see rot and decay. We're going to smell it in the air as the leaves start breaking down, and all of that happens, and there will be many animals who come to the end of their life at this time of year. There will be many plants who release their leaves or who die back because they don't live through the winter. And so we could think about seasonally just acknowledging this, acknowledging that it's happening, and seeing how we can participate in things we're ready to release, we're ready to give death to in our own lives. We can be intentional about it, right? We can choose things. This is powerful. This is the point of magic and sorcery, right? It's choice. We can choose the things in our lives within ourselves that we no longer wish to give life support to, that we no longer wish to nourish, that we no longer wish to engage with, and give them death. You know, let them go, let them move on their way and send them back to source. One really beautiful way to do that is through the tending of an actual compost bin, right? That your bin is an altar to the mysteries of death. A compost bin is a direct engagement with life and death and decomposition and rebirth and fertility and fecundity and mystery. All of that's happening inside that little bin, whatever your little bin looks like. Our compost bins are an invitation to do this work, right? Which is kind of one of my favorite ways to do it. Working through the soil, right? The soil is the medium of decomposition. So when we die, when things return to the land, they are on the land, right? They're on the surface of the soil, and we start that decomposition process, and we're slowly brought back down in to the earth. And so to be in contact with soil is to be in contact with a substance that is quite literally made out of decomposed materials. The fertility of the soil comes from all of that which has died and been broken down into the soil. Soil is a manifestation of the tenacity of life and the ebb and flow of vital force, right? That material that we can hold in our hands, that brown, fragrant, fertile material, has all been part of living body before, right? And so there's that meditation to confront and explore. And the biggest one, which we're going to talk about here in a second, is to work with materials that are actually in a process of decay. They're actually decomposing. Not so much animal parts, because that's a whole different thing and there's some safety stuff there. But for me, mostly plant materials, and I'm going to share some rituals with you here in a second. So why would we want to do this? Why would we want to engage so consciously and intentionally? First and foremost, to let shit go. It's very easy for us to get stuck into patterns, to holding patterns, to go through experiences that crystallize and become part of our tissues, to hold on to things that we know are not serving us, but that give us a sort of sense of control by keeping them, right? Like if we keep them, at least we know where they are. I experienced that. I think all of us experience that. I think it's part of being a human. So when we choose when we decide that there is a belief, a pattern, a behavior, an idea, an experience that we no longer want to nourish, we no longer want to house it, and nourish it, we can choose to let it go. So this work is about letting go and releasing what no longer serves, what has become dead to us, what no longer is relevant in where we want to go and be as people. On a more aggressive side, this can be done as a work of banishment. And I am completely fine with that, right? Like, we talk about a lot of, healing and love and harmony around these parts, but sometimes somebody, has to go. Not in a death sort of way, but like on an energetic level, like we're banishing them from us, we're sending them out. But more often than not, again, it's stuff from within. It's stuff we do. It's ways that we beat ourselves up, get in our own way, toxify ourselves, traumas that we hold on to, self-limiting, beliefs, negative mental atmospheres. This stuff is all worthy of being banished when we're ready to banish it, when it makes sense for us as individuals, when it's right for us to do that. So to let go, to release, to banish, to return what is no longer needed or no longer wanted in a way that is complete, again, that fulfills a cycle. There is spiritual ecology in doing it this way, right? We are aware that everything we have comes from the land, and that to return it to land makes sense. And, again, to just engage with the mysteries of death and decay and birth, right? It's a very beautiful thing. So as we wrap up here, let me give you a few rituals, a few ideas of what this can look like practically in your work, how you can take everything we've talked about, the process of rot and decay, the mysteries, the pulling down, the releasing and banishing, and actually put this to work. So one thing that I like to do with banishing work is to recognize that the reason I've held on to it for so long is some part of me believes that it's beautiful, right? Some part of me believes that it's beneficial, or that I deserve it, or that by keeping it, I have maintain some control, right? Or whatever. And so I like working with flowers, beautiful, colorful, fragrant flowers, because in some way I have made this thing, this belief pattern, whatever, beautiful for myself. I've turned it into something that is being misinterpreted as medicine. And so I like to work with an actual flower that is beautiful and fragrant and sweet to do this work. So what I will generally do is find a flower that through divination or whatever is amicable to helping me do the work, or just picking some flowers up from the flower shop. That's cool too. And asking for the flowers to sort of soak up or lift up or comb out, right, the issue for me and hold it for me. And then I take those flowers to compost, and that might be placing them on the soil. It might be turning them into a compost bin. It might be, leaving them in nature somewhere, knowing what's going to happen. But that physical act makes it easier. When I have clients that are in there doing talk therapy about letting stuff go, I'm like, for every session of talk therapy you do, and I'm a big proponent of talk therapy, go do some physical ritual to support it. Like, get it into your physical body too, because talk therapy can be so cerebral. And sometimes we need ritual. We always need ritual, right? Actually. So, that's a thing. And always remember too, that when we return something to the land to compost, there's a great deal of trust, of faith even, that the energy that supports that thing we no longer want will be, again, broken back down. The pattern itself does not survive compost. It's not going to come back to haunt you. It's when you put that compost on your garden next year, you're not feeding them with the thing you're trying to get rid of. Compost is about breaking down, unwinding, unfolding, deprogramming, deconstructing. It's getting things back to their bare bones, to their essence, back to their purity, right? So you don't have to worry about that. So there's flower for banishment. I like apples for doing healing work. To charge the apple or hold the apple or work even with an apple tree before the apple is harvested with petitions, I'm dealing with this healing thing, please help me release it, to let it go, to have revelation about the things that I might be doing to hold on to this, ways that I'm unwilling to let go of it or whatever, because we do that. And again, letting the apple take on the charge. And then what I like to do with apples, especially because of the way they hold vital force and the way they show up in folklore, is I like to cut the apple, right? So I've charged the apple with the issue that I want to release, either through symbol or feeling or just by holding it and asking the apple to help me, apple spirit to help me. And then I put the apple, usually do this outside, I put the apple, somewhere on a tree stump or on the ground, and I cut it in half. And it's kind of a ritual slaying, right? It's a ritual cutting. And then I bury or, set the apple somewhere or turn it into your compost. If you have the ability to leave the apple, especially in a healing case, in a little corner of your garden somewhere, where you can observe and experience the decomposition process. It's very beautiful. It takes a while. Sometimes they just disappear. Animals will come and take them off and eat them, and that's awesome. That's scavenging. That's part of it, right? We should not think that what we put into that will cause some problem for the animal, because they are acting as decomposers. They're breaking it down. They're unwinding it. This is a power that they have that we don't have. To be able to watch them disappear, whether they just disappear or watching them disappear as they rot back into the soil, is a beautiful meditation and a beautiful way to stay engaged with the magic. Similarly, and the last one I'll share here is, as we're getting into higher time, is the autumn leaves, right? The leaves are about to start falling off the trees. So one thing that I like to do every year is you just sit on your front porch or in a park or wherever and just watch, leaves fall off trees. And every time a leaf falls off tree, allow yourself to just release what needs to be released. What you're holding on to, what's not good for you, what you're ready to be done with. Be aware that as we move from the water energy, the downward flowing water energy of autumn, into the earth energy of winter, we move from sunset into midnight. We move into quieting down, into slumber and sleep. We really have to think, when the leaves are releasing, what do we want to sleep on over the winter? What do we want to take to bed with us? What do we want to heal and replenish with? Because it will influence the following year, right? So let go of all the guilt, all the shame, all the failures, all the incompletes, all the tried and didn't succeed, all that stuff. Let it go. Like, you'll have a spring will come. This is what nature teaches us. There will be rebirth. For everything you give death to, it will nourish new life, right? So you'll get around to the spring will come, and the plants will open, and the bees will wake up, and the birds will sing, and the days will lengthen, and you can do it all over again in a different way next time. And that, to me, is pretty damn beautiful, right? So watch the autumn leaves, and with each leaf that falls, release something into that leaf or with that leaf. Or if you're someone who allows the leaves to stay and do their thing, which you should do, no raking, no leaf blowing, personal opinion, you can hold those leaves. You can try to catch one as it falls and just put all the things into that leaf that you need to release, because that leaf is already in a pattern of moving down, releasing, letting go. The minute that leaf separates from the plant, decomposition ritual has begun. So just align yourself to it. Be part of the ritual intentionally. We already are. Be part of it intentionally, right? And let's wrap it up. That's a lot. It's a big class. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Hopefully this was inspiring for you and will give you ways to engage not only with the season, the mysteries of this time of year, but with the mysteries of death, right? And how there is so much life surrounded by death. And similarly, there is always the seed of death held in life. And that is just part of it. But there's so much magic and beauty even in all of that when we sit with it. So thanks for hanging out to the end. Let me know what you think. If you want to take some of the more advanced classes, and yes, this is not an advanced class. So if you really want to get into some stuff, advanced classes, courses in spiritual herbalism, guided monthly plant spirit journeys, ritual demonstrations, behind the scenes stuff. There's links down below where you can find all of that content, and that I will send you out into the autumn tide with blessings of peace and plenty. I'll see you next time. Take care.